A good progression system is what truly makes a game great. Now, you can have a great game without an amazing progression system, but this is the reason that discourages many players from playing some of their most favorite games. Minecraft, Terraria, Pokemon, they all have their each individual progression systems, which all seem to lack a certain something which the other has that they don't. Let's start with Minecraft. On the screen is all of the melee weapons added for about 10 years from Minecraft's conception till about 2020, and they only added the netherite sword in 2020. And to be fair, recently I have to give them their props. They have added the mace and the spears, which has helped diversify their melee category. But when you put that into perspective, a game like Terraria, this is their melee progression system. Now, while I know that Terraria and Minecraft are two very different games at their core, the point I'm trying to make is both of these progression systems are flawed. One is too simple, and one, although some may see as complex, that's not the true problem with Terraria's progression systems, in my opinion. In my opinion, the true problem with it is it relies too much off random mob drops, which can often feel tedious, killing bosses multiple times just to obtain one item to help them craft a new weapon. Now enter Hytale. Simon and his team have a truly amazing opportunity to have Hytale be one of the most immersive games with their progression system. This can already somewhat be seen through the use of the new zones, which Simon has recently announced the names of. Now, these zones will consist of two or three regions each, with each region including several biomes, and Simon has also stated that they are being treated as tiers of difficulty. However, the scaling of this difficulty has not yet been nailed down as they have other things to focus on while trying to get the game out for early access launch on January 13th. However, this is already a great path in my opinion because it allows for better scaling in the future, meaning that the game doesn't feel as linear once you get to late game as other areas will feel as hard when you get later in the game as Zone 1 may feel at the beginning of the game. Let's compare this to Minecraft again, for example. The Nether is often seen as a lot more challenging than the overworld. However, in Hytale, the Nether equivalent may be seen as Zone 4, which can be accessed in the same dimension, but to be fully capable of challenging it, you may want to up your gear to have any chance of being able to fight the mobs and possibly bosses and dungeons that may be lurking in there. Now, I think this is a great opportunity to take the game in a direction that's not often seen, where you're able to choose the path that you take, whether it may be you decide to take on a certain boss now to obtain a loot drop that he has, which helps you defeat another boss, or if you simply want to continue upgrading your loot in Zone 1, for example, and then challenge the boss in Zone 2, and then challenge the boss in Zone 3. But you also have the option to go straight to Zone 3 and have a more challenging experience. And it's catered to your own challenges and desires, which I think is very cool and will allow for a lot more entertaining playthroughs, and it won't feel as linear when running through the game again. Now, I think the perfect way to do this is to have bosses of varying difficulties in each zone. For example, in Zone 2, I would like to see a very challenging boss, which is often going to be challenged in the mid to late game, but there should also be a boss which is very simple to defeat and is more of a warm up task for the bosses later on. However, Zone 4, for example, I would more like to see the challenging bosses, as that's meant to be the scarier zone to get into. And I don't want it to be seen as easy when you're in the late game and you have good loot, as it can make the game just feel stale if everything is just too easy for you. Now, another way which I think could massively and help the progression variation is with classes. This can already somewhat be seen in the footage playing in the background with the different melee weapons. You have the daggers, which allow for sort of more quick jab attacks, which seem to put the enemies off guard. And then we also have the maces and the axe, which allow for whirlwind attacks or dives and the jumps. And then we have the classic sword, the hit and block with the shield, which is great, as this already shows the paths that Hytale could take if this is all executed properly. And it's just amazing to me how a game with such little development time and a small dev team at the moment. Now, I know the game's been in development for a few years, but in the past month or two, we've seen more footage and pictures than we have in the past few years, which is just insane to me. And it really makes me believe that Hytale is going in a great direction under Simon's team and his leadership. And January 13th can't come soon enough. I want to see many different aspects. I want to see the Pokemon aspect where you build your team. Obviously, we don't have Pokemon in Hytale, but you want to cater to each individual need with something in your loadout. Maybe you will want a dagger weapon for the smaller fights with the lower tier enemies, and then you want the big melee mace to deal with the big bosses. I want a bit of everything. I want some magic included in there just so you can play with different classes. So not everything has to be sword, mace, daggers. Maybe we could have staffs, and then we could also have lots of ranged weapons. We've already seen the gun video, which I'm pretty sure shocked us all, but it was interesting because it's shown us that the game is not going to be limited strictly to melee as the number one most powerful item of combat in the game, which is often the case in Minecraft, for example. You can't really get a weapon more powerful than a fully maxed out netherite sword. Although there have been more additions, I think that will always be the go-to, and that's not something I want to see. I don't want there to be one item which trumps the rest. I want there to be three, four, or five, which all have their own strengths and weaknesses, which are good in different scenarios compared to others. I think that is what truly could make the Hytale progression system amazing. Really, I just don't want the game to be easy. I want it to feel like an accomplishment when I beat the final boss, whoever that may be, and however long it may take for that final boss to be added to the game. Because Minecraft, I know I keep bringing it up, is probably my favorite game of all time. I don't really get much sense of accomplishment when I defeat the Ender Dragon because it's just been done so many times and it's just gotten boring at this point. And even the first few times I did it, it was fun, but it was always underwhelming. It never felt too challenging. And I don't think that's how a final boss of the game should be done. And I want there to be side bosses which elevate the RPG experience, but are not necessary for the game's progression. I think that all of these things together and the competent dev team that we've already seen truly could make the Hytale progression system great. And I want the combat and adventure aspect of this game to be perfect because we've already seen some of the things that the building and the creative world gen can do. So what's really left for me to see is the combat and the adventure because that's my favorite thing in these games. And if that's perfect well, not perfect because we know it's not going to be perfect at launch, but if they can master it, I think Hytale is going to be around for many years to come. Hope you enjoyed. I hope you guys drop your thoughts on what I've said today in the comments. Let me know what you think about the progression system, what you want to see implemented, what you don't want to see. And yeah, have a good one.